Hello everyone, today we are going to go through an interesting problem which is flatten nested list iterator. So basically what we are doing here is that we receive as input a nested list, which is a vector or an array where we have integer and list of integer which can be nested, right? And we are supposed to flatten that element, that input we receive. And the question here is, how are we going to organize ourselves? What do we have as input? What do we have as scenario, right? So in this specific case, we have a class, and in the class you are provided with three actually function, which is the nested iterator, which is the constructor of the function. You have the next, and then you have the hasNext. And then what are those functions doing actually? The nested iterator is actually the initializer, like the constructor of our method, of our class. And then you have the int next, which is actually a function which returns the next integer in the nested list. I'm going to explain you what it is. And then you have the hasNext, which is actually a boolean which is checking if we have an element that we can return from the state where we are actually. So now, given those elements, what does that mean? What are some examples? How do we solve it? How do we approach it? Before diving into it, if you're new here, yes, Agro Architect, I really encourage you to subscribe to not miss what you're doing here, because here we are doing LeetCode daily hackering solutions. So if you're interested in any of those topics, don't hesitate to subscribe. And if you are interested into any discussion related to coding, don't hesitate to join the Discord server. The link is just in the description. So now let's dive in, right? So we have the nested iterator. So here we are going to define our nested iterator the way we want, in order for us to fulfill those two elements, because these are the two elements that we are really concerned of. We have the next, and then we have the hasNext. So basically, when you receive as input like this, if you look from left to right, this is the first integer, this is the one you should return. This is the second integer, the second element you should return. This is the third one, the third you should return, and so on. Just that they are not flattened yet. We have nested elements, so you need to figure out exactly how to organize yourself to flatten this. So basically, for me, there are two approaches here. Either you flatten your element during the construction, or you flatten your element when you are performing the next. So in this video, I'm just going to demonstrate the one where we are flattening while checking the next, because I feel like it is more aesthetic, it's more nice. So what we are going to do is that, let me explain a better way. What we are going to do is that our next iterator is just going to transform our input into a stack like this, where we will have the last element at the bottom, because you want to remove the first element first, right? So the first element should be at the top. So basically, our nested iterator is just going to transform our input into something like this. Once we have it, now our hasNext is going to do a double job. The first job will be to check if we have, in fact, the goal of the hasNext is to check if the next element of our stack is actually an integer. And if it's not an integer, what he will do is that he will transform our first element into small element until the first element is an integer, or until we are at the end of our stack. That means when he's going to check, do we have next integer here? No, we don't have. He's going to break this down into something into small part. That means it's going to loop through the list and create element and add those elements into our stack. If by performing this it reached the end of the stack, that means there is no integer, so it's going to return false. So by doing so, this one is just going to prepare the stack to have the next integer at the top, and the hasNext we're just going to return that next element and remove that element from the stack. What would the code look like? The code will look like this. That means when we are going to check the hasNext, what we are going to do is that we are going to check if the stack is, we are going to perform while the stack is not empty. We are going to first check, okay, is the first element an integer? If the first element is an integer, we return true, because we know that this next will be able to take the first element and just get the integer and return it. If the first element is not an integer, we are going to take that first element because we know that it is either an integer or a list. So if it's not an integer, we are going to take that element, loop through all of our elements and add those elements to our stack. That is what we did here. So this one is not an integer. We take it, we loop through our element and we add to our stack. It is possible that after adding, you still have list instead of integer. You have a while. That's why we have a while here. So you are going to repeat this until the top is actually an integer. If you find yourself that the stack is empty after repeating this, you are going to return false. That means there is nothing. So if the stack is not empty, that means the first element should be an integer, and this one is just going to take that element, remove the element, and return the result. So this is my approach for solving this. I hope you enjoy it. Feel free to leave me any input. I'll be really happy to interact with you regarding this. See you on the next video. Ciao.